seeing and believing. In the creation of U-Face, there were 5 ministries, each in charge of a different component of U-Face. The Ministry of Administration, led by Lord Vader, enforces rules within U-Face ranks. The Ministry of External Affairs, supervised by YB, manages alliances and relationships with other anti-Kondo groups. The Ministry of Security, later Nimrirad's responsibility, keeps the U-Face server and members safe. The Ministry of Internal Affairs, managed by ARGS, manages server bots and internal matters. The Ministry of Propaganda creates material that warns against the effects of Kondos. Initially, no one knew where to assign my minister position. Nimrirad was originally going to become the Minister of Propaganda, as he had made some images of his own, albeit lacking the intentional symbolism and unique messages characterizing my own creations. There, I made 2 major actions that decided the fate of that ministry. 1. I showed the ministers my current pieces of encouragement material, believing that they will set up a useful foundation for its future endeavors. 2. I asked for the Ministry of Propaganda to be renamed the Ministry of Truth. Not only does the term propaganda carry a negative connotation, it utilizes exaggerations and falsifications to reinforce a point. My encouragement material never does any of this, as all of its messages and information derive from evidence. Unexpectedly, this resulted in my establishment as the Minister of Truth, inevitably progressing the anti-Kondo community. If the Kon members' original impact was to spread their corruptive influence, then it will not remain unchallenged on my watch. At this time, endless ideas found their way onto my drawings, both digital and physical, though like before, it had been certainly difficult for them to garner significant influence outside of U-Face. Days after I adopted my position as Minister of Truth, I became involved in various activities of U-Face, regarding my ministry or otherwise. My first task was to establish some roles for my ministry. Taking my limitations into consideration, I settled on the following, from lowest rank to highest. The informant directs potential encouragement material or ideas to the educational supervisor or Minister of Truth. A public communicator releases images or videos to various groups, covering the influential limitations I possess on my own. The educational creator creates images or videos as encouragement material, warning against the Kondo community. The educational supervisor compiles and provides feedback on encouragement material drafts, acting as a mentor for the rest of the ministry. A representative of truth, possessing a similar role as the public communicator, but releases images or videos to allied groups rather than external communities. They also consult with the Minister of Truth on which material can be released to the rest of U-Face before it is perfected. As the Minister of Truth, I combine the roles of educational supervisor and educational creator. As uncharacteristic this may seem to a social movement, the structure helps retain cohesion on each member's objectives. This gave me time to continue examining the ways in which anti-Kondo users develop. I had even considered pursuing a teaching degree for that purpose, though that idea did not last long given that it would, in the long run, hinder my contribution time against the Kondo community. Meanwhile, the basic ideas regarding an anti-Kondo ideology were later attempted to be emulated by Nimrirad. Inspired by Kondology study, he attempted a political manifesto called Crisis, even asking for my help in creating it. While it fails in depth and influence due to Nimrirad's lackluster reflective abilities, My knowledge of historical and political literature came into relevance with identifying this. I gradually began to recognize the relevance of distributing my experiences, rather than solely managing U-Face from a logical perspective. Nothing becomes real until it is experienced. Hearing and listening. The constant for my learning, in U-Face or otherwise, was that my knowledge must exceed the limits of contemplation. Only through theoretical examination, application, and practical observation can my process become a direct contributor against the con member's influence. The lengthy pattern of errors are likely the outcome of limited resources regarding the condo community, alongside varying degrees of con member understanding among the anti-condo community. However, these ideas can be optimized if the anti-condo community was subject to correcting its flaws, which can enhance or decrease group activity depending on the group's current consistency to its objective. Each group leader must also overcome, or at least recognize, the instinct catalyzing the departure of anti-condo users and growth of condo groups. By educating a group leader, they will develop the capacity to promote the correct values and methods to their group. Thus, the tasks of my involvement in U-Face remained clear. I had to ensure that its members, and by extension the group, remained consistently dedicated to the elimination of condos. This perspective can be reinforced from two directions: preserving the order of roadblocks, in my case, human value as a whole, or advocating for the safety of children from the con members' influence. As an anti-condo newcomer, I had been unable to recognize the difference between either motivation, as I had not experienced both perspectives, and both led to the same outcome. It had taken years to attain the universal foundations and inspiration necessary to productively educate the anti-condo community. As I settled into my role as U-Face Minister of Truth, I knew that it was the foundation, if not the core contributor, to my ability and range in educating the anti-condo community. The Ministry of Truth's role became to establish, no matter how bluntly, the greedy and lustful nature of the con member, and to expose their true relevance, appeal, and influence on the public's actions. By actively seeking fundamental knowledge, my arguments become solid enough that other critics question their accuracy and the practicality of their proposed solutions, if any solutions were proposed at all. Where other perceptions are blind to the full picture, lay the strengths that I compiled through years of study. I knew it was not the scholar's role to determine the extent an outcome can be accomplished, but to establish the outcome in its entirety. With several audiences, including U-Face members, the decisive factor is rarely accuracy, but often the presentation of an idea. Many times, I learned the hard way that when I present an educated perspective to the uneducated, the impact becomes less motivating and is perceived as irrelevant information. Where the scholar must reinforce an objective, the audience must work towards its fulfillment. Therefore, the beliefs and actions of any individual, especially the initial response, are determined by the extent they can understand or emphasize with the proposed reality. The extent Nimrod redirected U-Face from it becomes useful to determine the extent I recognize the reality of the con member, and how well I could consistently encourage action against condo groups. I knew full well that human flaws can obscure truths, inadequate methods, and imperfect outcomes. The more successful I become at reinforcing U-Face progression, the clearer and more powerful my demonstrated communicative abilities. Even within an anti-condo group, a scholar's strength lies not just in their understanding, but the factors of its presentation. Religion is a major example of how a theory, regardless of its factual accuracy, can be presented in ways that remain viable to the modern age. Religions, regardless of mythology, address the universal factors of culture, morality, and purpose. Similarly, the importance of opposing the Kondo community aligns with culture, morality, and purpose. The only difference between the two are that the anti-Kondo community works exclusively to benefit humanity and society, outside of a core figure or figures. To truly benefit you-face through my studies, I cannot continue to distance myself from the greatest problems, even if they only become valuable in the future. It does not matter that there is no initial reward for my accomplishments. It does not matter that the public currently lacks understanding of their hidden threat. The success and significance of my knowledge compile in the present, and will be released with the witness. The most unwilling to listen are the small-minded, content with the con members' selfishness and complacency. Their importance, like the con member, lies in the present, as they blindly accept their flaws without seeking to overcome them. Often, they will appear in anti-Kondo groups and propagate the foundations of human weakness. Instances like this test the scholar's ability to reject this discouragement, to embody what they learned and protect those that are vulnerable to the con members' futility and discouragement. In long periods of study, the scholar also adopts the role of an audience. The more this balance is practiced, the more definitive the scholar's ability to counter the sense of futility and disbelief. This understanding illustrates the benefits of developing intellectual strength, of working for the future rather than the present. Where the public cannot comprehend the outcomes of the future, it is the scholar's role to prepare themselves for the inevitable struggles ahead. To actively embrace difficulty for intellectual growth embodies the actions that make humanity valuable. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. Feeling and healing. Among the intellectually powerful, among those who are willing to work endlessly through countless struggles, are often those who recognize and compensate for the times they display weakness. Reformers and reinforcers alike, including Martin Luther King and Winston Churchill respectively, demonstrate their transition from disorderly to influential. I knew that this experience would be immensely important to individual development, but I have no intention of promoting weaknesses for this reason, especially since it backfires more often than not. The individual's natural development was too clear for me to remain oblivious to its biggest obstacles. Here again, later developments aligned with what I predicted this obstacle to be. That today's idea of success is primarily self-centered. In America alone, 2/3 of respondents associate success with achieving personal goals, with 89% of those mentioning loving what you do for a living. Unfortunately, motivations of con leaders include money and the community, which align with personal goals and possibly a living. Not only do con members weaken moral standards and human strengths, they corrupt the modern definition of success. One con leader, who had maintained this role for 6 years, stated that they
used to do it for fun, found out people earn Robux, did it for both, then found out real cash is involved, now do it for cash.
Used to do it for fun, found out people earn Robux, did it for both, then found out real cash is involved, now do it for cash.
Payment comes from server owners.
Indicating that the con leaders are more than willing to promote their own industry at the cost of both the public and roadblocks, with a con leader even claiming,
"It's just not fun and is affecting my mental health."
Furthermore, All benefits and profits of the condo industry are excessively glorified. The sheer number of condo servers make it difficult to reliably profit from condo creation, and notable positions there become targets for other con leaders as well. One successful con leader was
hated by the elite originals. There had been 58 dox attempts on me.
It was well known that the condo community is an industry of sabotage, directly against Roblox and other con leaders, and indirectly against the public. Every idea, even the best, in the condo community becomes dangerous at best, and life-destroying at worst. What the anti-condo community must fight for is to safeguard humanity's true values, to ensure growth, not weakening, is the outcome of anything promoted to the current and future generations. Humanity has matured into advanced civilizations, and we need to remember what we need to accomplish this. Every thought, every idea, every fact, all must be applicable to the capacity to act on benefit, not impulse or comfort. Everything must be examined from this criteria and utilized according to its contribution, and discarded if it provides little. Even a small group, no theory in these categories, if applied consistently, will lead to unproductivity, since it fulfills progression in some way. Thus, it was the conclusions drawn from the con leaders' motivations that drew my attention to the fundamentals of modern values, outside of the public's complacency or indifference. By extension, the financial allure would become relevant as an obstacle against UFACES contribution to the Roblox community. I began to study the con member again, and once again grew my understanding of the content of the con leaders' influence. While their values remain intelligible to me, the true extent of their selfishness and greed, being willing to imprison others through unethical and disruptive profit, has proven something everyone needs to prepare against. In another respect, knowledge of the con leaders' profits would be a significant blow against someone who has not believed strongly enough in the significance of intellectual strength. For instance, when Nimrirad decided to resign from UFACE, one of the newer members felt obliged to blame UFACE for negatively impacting Nimrirad's mental health. They utilized an irrelevant point of comparison in claiming that
there is only so much a community can do against a growing number of people on an already immeasurably large website. Condo players spend the same amount of time as termination groups, so who is in the right?
This member even went as far as accusing the entire anti-condo community of being chronically online. Not only does this user promote the same sense of futility and disbelief that destroyed many an anti-condo group, they attempt to reinforce time spent as a comparison of morality, disregarding anti-condo values entirely. Evidently, there was no demonstrated understanding of the condo or anti-condo community's values, making this member more vulnerable to the con member's influence. This claim prompted me to answer, using my collected knowledge on the anti-condo community to reinforce how relevant the condo problem is to wider society. By referencing society teaching us to act against injustice, supplemented by the bystander effect and humanity's difference from animals, I outlined, as I had done in this book, how our current behaviors influence the values and actions of our successors. The member I was addressing promptly left, finding no self-justification. Through this experience, it was reinforced that understanding the ways that con members spread their influence, as well the reasons they appear reasonable, is highly necessary to rescue individuals from intellectual weakness. Humans learn and think best in situations that directly impact themselves, so I work towards exposing myself to not just theories and research, but also involving myself in discussions where I can enthusiastically utilize my knowledge. Where I once focused on studying more than speaking, I now created opportunities where I can address the condo problem to a larger audience, and my oratory experience grew exponentially. My speech habits kept training to become sufficiently understood regardless of moral or intellectual background. Thanks to this, I successfully crafted several short speeches addressing UFACE, motivating them to continue working against the condo community. By feeling people's thought processes, I strengthened the general discipline of UFACE and formed the center of its activities. To heal means to stop damage from controlling lives. Trailing and understanding. Following Nimrirad's resignation, a former member of the ODH, named Amri, was selected to replace him as the Minister of State Security. An interesting problem was brought up. Internal affairs and administration already suited to handle UFACE safety. It was decided for UFACE to disband the Ministry of State Security and replace it with the Ministry of Action, which organizes reports to address roadblocks, bypasses, and draw attention to platform issues. Meanwhile, despite being the Minister of Truth, I oversaw and occasionally participated in other ministries' matters. I helped apply server moderation, write report reasons for CON members, and supervise intergroup negotiations. UFACE had rightfully given members the bare minimum of responsibility, and it was the most inexperienced who contributed most in a short time frame after they joined. In short, UFACE was faring exactly how I expected any group to fare, initially alluring until its methods become either ineffective or repetitive. I was the first minister to willingly remove any member that does not demonstrate productivity within a month. It was because of my initiative that the Ministry of Truth contained the highest number of active members out of any ministry, never dropping below 3 other active contributors. Granted, the Ministries of Administration, Internal Affairs, and External Affairs had few open positions in the first place, which may become an issue for UFACE future activity due to its limited variety. Regardless, the fact that UFACE is a group instead of an alliance causes it to rely on others' initial enthusiasm to efficiently contribute. Without decisive and unified leadership, combined with a number of anti-condo groups established, UFACE faces severe obstacles to its growth, and by extension my range of educational influence. However, UFACE does not suffer from the same self-centered perception that many other anti-condo groups are vulnerable to. They never develop the illusion that an anti-condo group is most effective as a military, and were fortunately departing from any political imitations that Nimri Arad had once established. After all, those who imitate others without learning the reasons for success are bound to imitate the mistakes as well. As such, I decided to personally create encouragement material for other anti-condo groups as well as UFACE. Regardless of the member size of each group, all of them had less than 20 active members. This allowed me to identify the most dedicated anti-condo users and show them my encouragement material, becoming influential enough for one group to open an encouragement material division of its own. Regardless, this was a time in which anyone unsatisfied with the anti-condo community's efforts moved to a different group. Countless numbers of new groups appear only to vanish after a short time. Their leaders had no idea what it means to make a culture, let alone a contributor, out of a group. This is how even former anti-condo users become vulnerable to the CON members' influence. The world hates change, yet only change causes progress. Relishing and appealing. I determined U-Face members are no less susceptible against the con member. When I had seen the varying motives and levels of dedication, the simplicity of my peers motivated me to preserve U-Face after all, despite my initial misgivings about it. Everywhere I go, the significance of the Kondo community continue to hide behind insignificance until I shed light on their existence, appealing to the facts or, for the anti-Kondo community, urgently recommending the separation of their objectives from any irrelevant fields. Every time the appropriate moment comes up, I secure the attention of all present by logically addressing the Kondo community's relevance to the topic. The audience always responds with either admiration or speechlessness. If there were any objections to my speech, the objector did not believe they were solid enough to be a viable response. My influence did not stop in the digital world. As my final examinations for Year 12 conclude, I took the opportunity to refine not just my verbal impact, but also learn about non-verbal factors to a speech, intentionally mastering the ones that amplify my message. Fortunately, a classmate recommended a manifesto that would be pivotal to understanding how to communicate with emotion effectively. Not only did it amplify my abilities as a speaker, it contributed heavily to the witness structure, specifically the literary techniques and their placements. I read this manifesto eagerly, for now I had an example on how to acquaint myself with biographical productivity without significant deviation from my objective, the objective of educating the anti-Kondo community about themselves and the con member alike. With this I practiced the fundamentals of any movement leader, rather than simply memorizing them. Even before I actively sought to optimize my communicational abilities, I kept developing my
motivational, relational, strategic, and action skills, and the capacity to develop these skills in others.
As the minister of truth, brimming with newfound confidence, I had gotten in the habit of addressing relevant debate topics from both my own and the opponent's perspectives, collecting relevant evidence possibly used for either side, all while observing my gestures, expressions, and tone of voice in the mirror. I had known the anti-Kondo community for over a quarter of my life, and so I was well equipped to imagine the scenarios and failures from both sides. Manufacturing a sense of importance for raids, the frustration of each roadblock, the temptation of the Kondo game, willingly resisting intellectual growth, questioning morality's importance, hostility from other anti-Kondo groups. Most importantly, oversimplifying the anti-Kondo community's role in society. When reading the manifesto my classmate recommended, I was astonished to recognize each of these themes being discussed, albeit from its contextual politics. The failures of each party and the members' behaviors all reflected the current situation of Roblox community, nearly 100 years after the manifesto was written. The writer had evidently experienced a similar process to what I had spent years compiling. My confidence was further amplified, recognizing that my path to intellectual development was a tested path, universally applicable to true strength. Looking back at how I conducted leadership from the ODH, my methods at the time could not be different to how I conducted myself as the minister of truth. Even the process of recruitment had changed drastically with my motives. Once, I sought to join or found an anti-Kondo group. Now, I had no desire to do so. I knew that a group was only as strong as its leadership, and paradoxically I still relished in the opportunities it provided. My role in U-Face, and by extension the Minister of Truth, helped me develop the experience and skill set to become an efficient writer and speaker. Even if I depart from the anti-Kondo community eventually, It is a skill set that will be useful for the future. Knowledge gives power. Character gives respect. Sensing and deducing. Eventually, a meeting was held regarding the political and military components that Nimrod left behind. All of UFACE knew that this only served to hinder its general dedication. These structural inconsistencies deterred some genuine anti-Kondo users from joining, mistaking it for a militaristic group, especially with its dedication and strictness necessary but absent in the general anti-Kondo community. After some discussion, it was decided to remove anything that does not contribute against Kondos or distracts the anti-Kondo community. Earlier, it was mentioned that Nimrod established parties in UFACE, which consisted of the Stability League, the Harmony Alliance, and the Reformation League. Depending on which one is in power during the month, UFACE will focus on a different approach against Kondos. Despite UFACE parties already being unsuccessful, containing only their leaders, they were promptly disbanded. To further reinforce UFACE departure from political LARPing, on the 22nd of November 2024, all messages in UFACE Discord server were deleted. This included any election records and announcements. Even the party leaders, all of whom were UFACE staff members, were willing to sacrifice any potential power these parties offered them, for the benefit of UFACE as an anti-Kondo group. The remaining ministers, including myself, were now realistically and optimally contributing against Kondos in alignment with my expectations of a true anti-Kondo group. Now, the mistakes I learned the hard way are being removed after Nimrod's departure. After disbanding the parties, we turned our attention to our next efforts, specifically each minister's progress. Lord Vader set up the Ministry Integrated Updates, or MIUS. They are a monthly report of each ministry's actions, compiled from their ministers and their records of each ministry. There were also the Server Integrated Updates, or the SI.US, which compiled the UFACE ministry statistics individually. They consisted of reports, achieved targets, and expected targets. Both MIUS and SIUS were conducted monthly. The reports worked well in jump-starting UFACE ministers' dedication to both UFACE and to the goal of eliminating the Kondo community. It was a visible sign of leadership progress, though there was still the tedious issue of preventing any confusion from happening in the future. It certainly did not help that the current generations generally prioritized comfort over intellectual strength. Generation Y's mindset was described as,
Work hard, play harder, but try to only work where you can see yourself play.
Making them highly vulnerable to the con members' influence and deterring them from the disciplined approach necessary for the anti-Kondo community. To a similar effect, Generation Z prioritizes exploration or identity, easily exploitable by the con members' overemphasis on freedom. Furthermore, the future of the anti-Kondo community does not appear promising, as the lowest competency component included knowledge and skills, ethics, and leadership skills, the latter of which is necessary for the anti-Kondo community to remain relevant to societal issues, and the former two are foundational to the current anti-Kondo community. If I did not outlive the Kondo industry, I needed to ensure a sufficient transition for the anti-Kondo community. I knew long ago that relying on ethics would not be sustainable, so I identified the values of humanity and intellectual strength. These were the same values that my ministry's encouragement material began to promote, reinforcing the effectiveness and relevance of my latest motivations against condos. A similar pattern to my efforts in peace followed the Ministry of Truth. While their methods worked tremendously within UFace, the rest of the anti-condo community largely dismissed the change. Given that a significant portion of the anti-condo community are teenagers, there were a few possible explanations. They likely failed or refused to recognize that the current efforts are unsustainable. Some never believed in the anti-condo community's values, as those of generations Y and Z aligned more with the con members. A final reason, and a highly likely one, was that I still had a lot to learn about encouragement material. My influential pride vanished in an instant. Is this not reflective of the public's increasingly indifferent attitude towards the condo community? Was the chain of inherent weakness too strong, or my bolt cutter too dull? How have the con members eroded society's strengths while openly flaunting their disorderly conduct? Just as the condo community was isolated from the detriments of their life, the anti-condo community was just as isolated from the true outcomes of their methods. No wonder the public inherently distances themselves from the conflict. While I believe that some anti-condo users before me had made attempts to seek further knowledge, what was written about the condo community were primarily news articles, which scapegoated the Roblox administration or parental figures more than it offered genuine feedback or solutions. I knew exactly how these predecessors felt. I had also come up short in direct resources, to the point I had reached out to other fields of research and connected them to the con member. I reflected on my failures, actively seeking feedback for what other groups perceived UFace as. Aside from the previously removed political emulations, several had still claimed UFace was too strict, while others complained about being removed from UFace membership despite contributing little to nothing. Once again, scapegoating was used to hinder the solution, rather than focus on the problem. Restlessly, I brainstormed methods to convince the anti-condo community about the truth of their efforts. I knew that something about my methodology had to change. It wasn't the absence of knowledge that prevented action, but the absence of the correct motivation or values. I am not someone who begins an effort half-heartedly, only to abandon it shortly after. This same mindset, the path of futility and disbelief, are why so many people join and leave groups until they become vulnerable to apathy and impulse. This mindset promotes intellectual weakness, something that does not belong in the public, let alone the anti-condo community. And yet, this mindset is what generally deters other anti-condo users from adopting change, or true dedication, against the condo community. UFace, which I initially perceived as one of many pseudo-contributors doomed to failure, had successfully evaded the one crucial flaw that killed tens, if not hundreds, of anti-condo groups. It had recovered from its political restrictions and adopted a culture of productivity. The content, the goal, and the pathway to victory is clearer here than elsewhere. The longer I continued my role as the Minister of Truth, the stronger my belief that UFace can remain as an organized anti-condo group that benefits its members and society in not just safety, but strength and knowledge. Never underestimate the power of human stupidity. Change is transition. To successfully change an entire community's habits, a simple slogan or poster will not be sufficient. What is necessary is a new philosophy, and for that, a consistent culture.
A clear set of shared attitudes, values, goals, and practices that characterize an institution or organization.
In this case, UFACE, and hopefully the anti-Kondo community. To accomplish this, I ask myself, what skill set do I possess which can accomplish this? My previous research experience with Kondology studies seemed appropriate regarding practices and goals against the Kon member. However, being just one of the hundreds of anti-Kondo users, regardless of consistency and dedication, hinders the impact of aforementioned research. It did not help that there were already limited resources regarding the Kondo and anti-Kondo communities, making research reliability even more difficult since there is nothing to compare my accuracy with. The radicalized LARPers of the anti-Kondo community always behave arrogantly towards anyone who has remained consistent towards opposing the Kondo community, despite the LARPers never receiving the necessary knowledge of progress to accomplish their goals. The question had always been, what have you learned? We need to ask, why have we learned? Any amount of education is only worth the extent and purpose it is used for. Where I mentioned 4 of my high school subjects, I began to convert all 6 into productivity. Biology and chemistry are important for the neurology of the Kon member. English contributes to the growth of intellectual strength by reinforcing the universal values of the human race. History and society and culture all reflect the psychological behaviors in individuals and communities. Even mathematics contributes to the Kondo and anti-Kondo communities' research statistics and progression recording. Even when a subject seems unrelated at first glance, I identified methods to convert them for the purposes of the Kondo community's downfall. The ability to not just contain knowledge, but also utilize it productively, is what differentiates a true scholar. The true scholar's abilities can only be optimized by becoming a competent speaker. My entire life's knowledge had all aligned at this point. I was a minister of truth, a scholar, a speaker, a member of the anti-Kondo community, and most importantly, an individual who knows intellectual strength. Art is like humanity, more impactful if every component is intentionally consistent.